Hi, Ben Constable with you from Spark Systems. Today I'm previewing the Enterprise Architect 14 release. The purpose of this session is to give you a high-level overview of the major change areas in the release. I'll also demonstrate some new features briefly in this session to help you prepare for the upcoming beta launch. But there are far too many updates in version 14 to cover everything today. So other webinars in this series will drill down into progressively more detailed topics, including things like the new model patterns, decision modeling notation support, model simulation enhancements, and others. So I'll start the overview by discussing what is really a theme within the EA14 release, that is, helping the user to focus EA's toolset in order to fulfill their modeling intent. What do I mean by that? Well, Enterprise Architect has a large and varied user base, involving everyone from requirements engineers and analysts to architects and developers. So its corresponding feature set is really big. With version 14, we're helping you to focus the range of tools to a set that's most relevant for the task you're undertaking at any given time. In other words, your modeling intent. Now that's a fine goal for such a large-scale application as Enterprise Architect, but what does EA14 provide specifically to achieve that? So I'm running an Enterprise Architect 14 pre-release here, and I'll start by demonstrating some new features that help to focus the tool set to fulfill your modeling intention. So one of the first areas I want to talk about is the new perspectives within EA14. So you'll see in the top right corner here the perspectives button, and that provides a range of preset perspectives that basically help to adapt Enterprise Architect's user interface to suit the tools that you need for your given task. So that may be within business modeling, for example, could be all of the business modeling activities that you're interested in, or just a particular subset like BPMN and so forth. Let's go ahead and select all business modeling, and you'll notice the first thing that the Perspectives does is to invoke the new model wizard, and that's offering just the set of model patterns that are related to business modeling. And that's by no means the complete set of model patterns that Enterprise Architect provides, just the set that helps us to focus on what we're doing. I'm going to come back to the model wizard a little bit later on, but I want to explain some other areas of EA's interface that the perspectives have a positive impact on. Take, for example, the diagram toolbox, which I'll open up here, just by clicking this button here. When I go to select a new toolbox page, for example, because I'm within the business modeling perspective, it just provides the toolbox pages that are relevant for that kind of modeling. I could further refine that set if I was more specific and just interested, say, in business process modeling. I could choose that perspective. Again, it will invoke the wizard and provide an appropriate set of patterns, but also notice the toolbox pages that are available are reduced to just the relevant set that I need for business process modeling. Another area that the perspectives will impact with regard to EA's interface is when you're selecting stereotypes for your elements. So for those that are using stereotypes on EA's elements, you can do that from the properties page. So I'll just bring up the properties. And notice when I go to select a stereotype here, so this is a mind map main topic stereotype. If I were to choose a different one, because of the perspective that I've got open, I just have the relevant set of profiles to choose from. So in my case, it's mind mapping, and I can easily go ahead and change the stereotype within that particular profile, which I don't need to do at this time. A third area that I'll mention where the perspectives really help to adapt EA's interface is when you're creating, say, a new diagram. Say from the project browser here, I can click the button here to create a new diagram, and instead of getting every kind of diagram that EA supports, which is a vast array, again, I just have the reduced set to do with the business process modeling perspective that I chose. So there's just a few ways that the perspectives help to narrow the tool set that Enterprise Architect offers you for the particular modeling task that you're undertaking. The portal changes in Enterprise Architect 14 also help you to get focus quickly. So you may have noticed the portal that Enterprise Architect provides in earlier versions. Well, this has certainly been updated. And what you're seeing here is by no means a final set. We're looking here at a pre-beta installation of Enterprise Architect. So this is certainly subject to change. But one of the new items, for example, will be the perspective button here. So that will invoke the list of perspectives, again, right from that launch pad when you first start up Enterprise Architect. And when you're just getting into a model, you may want to quickly get a status on the things that have been changed. So again, a status icon there to help you find, recently changed elements, recently discussed elements, that kind of thing. Some in-program user guides, if you like, will give you kind of a brief tutorial, a helpful tutorial within Enterprise Architect itself, just to help you get going. So this is not a final set by any means, but the portals give you that quick jump into the program and help you to get focused quickly on your modeling. The context browser is an entirely new view within Enterprise Architect, and you can see that it's linked here to the project browser. In fact, it's synchronized to it. But what it gives me is, again, a focused view of the model hierarchy. So for those that have worked in large teams with Enterprise Architect before, you know that you can have a deeply nested and rather complex model hierarchy if you've got a big team-based model. But typically, you're only working on a very small subset of that, and the context browser can help you stay focused within that particular branch of the model. So you notice that it provides just one part of the branch. So I've selected within the project browser, the Enterprise Architect 14 mind map. The context browser just shows me the contents of that particular package. So I can traverse the model hierarchy. So if I click up, I can now go into, say, the demo sandbox and see the contents within that package as well. But it's just giving me one package at a time, and again, that subset of the model hierarchy to help me stay focused in the particular area of the model that I'm interested in. I'll just mention very briefly about workspaces. They've basically been updated to accommodate the new views within Enterprise Architect 14, and they also tie in well with the perspectives as well. The next area that I want to discuss is some of the diagramming changes within Enterprise Architect. So first, perhaps and foremost, you've seen it briefly already, is the model wizard. And that's provided a whole range of new patterns within Enterprise Architect 14 and a specific view to help you with your modeling. So if I just invoke the model pattern wizard now, so within my demo sandbox, I'm going to create a new pattern. Again, as you saw before, because I set my perspective to business process modeling, well, the model wizard will give me just that subset of patterns. Of course, there's a huge range of model patterns available in EA14. I'm just going to show you very quickly. For example, if I went to all of the software engineering or software construction ones, there's a massive set of model patterns there. And obviously, they're more geared to that perspective, with C, C++. Not so important when we're talking about business process modeling. Okay, so let's just go back to BPMN modeling and have a look at the contents of some of these patterns. So you'll notice in the preview here, it actually shows me what this pattern is going to be like when I apply it and instantiate it within my model. It also gives me some detailed guidance. So what is the reason why I'd actually use this pattern? When is it appropriate? And how can I actually work with this pattern once I've instantiated it? What do I perhaps need to do after I've created the pattern? And where can I get help? So there's a lot of detailed guidance now that is provided within these model patterns. So just go ahead and create it. You see that I've got the option to choose where in the model hierarchy I want to place the new pattern. So I'm just going to put it in my demo sandbox there and single click of the button to create that pattern in Enterprise Architect. And there it is. Now, what I can do once I've instantiated that pattern, now I've opened up the diagram, I want to work on the model, I can actually tear off the model wizard and place that perhaps to the right there. So I get that guidance, if you like, while I'm actually working on the model. So it's a dockable view the model pattern provides now. You'll also see that it provides process guidance. Just going to tear that off and put it back to the main view. You'll see another really fascinating aspect of the model pattern wizard. It actually provides these model-based guidance patterns, if you like. So, for example, if I needed to install a particular kind of model repository, there's detailed guidance there, and that actually becomes a model that I can instantiate in my repository there. We'll come back to that, and future webinars will focus on this in a lot more detail. Just want to give you a little bit of a preview today, though. Another exciting new feature within Enterprise Architect 14 is the Inline reader, or the diagram reader. So there are a couple of ways to invoke that. You can use the arrows on the top right of the diagram caption bar there, or also within the design ribbon. You can choose a view mode there for the graphical and reader mode. So just clicking that button actually brings up what is really like some dynamic documentation for my model as I'm viewing the diagram. Now, this is an incredibly useful view. It does, of course, list my elements and the sub-elements, related elements, that kind of thing. I can actually sort that view. So, for example, this diagram really flows kind of more left to right. I can actually read the diagram in a textual manner, side by side with a visual representation there. Now, as I scroll through, if I wanted to make changes in a text-based editor, I can do that because this is actually an editable view. So it's very much like the specification manager in that regard. If I just go up a level, if I go to my overview diagram and open up the Inline diagram reader, one thing that I find is really useful with this view, once I sort it according to more of the ordering of my diagram, which is kind of like top down, left to right, as I scroll through, I can see there are some empty entries within my diagram. So what I'm representing here is the name and notes of the elements on this diagram. There are some entries there that have no documentation, and that in itself is a useful thing. It tells me when I go to generate this as a report, be that to the web or Word, PDF, whatever, I've got some missing documentation here. I need to fill that in. So that in itself is a useful part of this view. It's also linked dynamically to the diagram. So as I select a different element, you'll see that is what's shown in the tree. If I go to Enhanced Properties, for example, it jumps to that part of the reader. So it's a really dynamic and useful companion to the visual approach that you already have with EA's diagrams. And again, just invoke it or tuck it away just by one click of the button, like so. Also within diagramming, I want to explain briefly about the new Metamodel Views. And our enterprise architects on the call will certainly be interested in this facet of Enterprise Architect. So the Metamodel Views really support two main features. One is that it gives you a model-based approach to defining the relationships between stereotypes in your profile, both the quick linker definitions that are available as just drag to create a new connector, that kind of thing, but also the model validation rules that are supported for a given profile. Perhaps more important to the end user, those that are actually developing profiles, is that it dynamically allows you to filter your diagrams based on a metamodel view. And perhaps a good way to illustrate that is by using Archimate to do it. So let me just create an Archimate pattern. So if I go to the project browser here, again to my demo sandbox, I'm just going to add a new pattern. And it's going to be, I need to choose the Archimate perspective. So enterprise architecture I'm interested in, go to Archimate. I'm going to create a layered viewpoint. That's a fairly good example of what I'm trying to talk about here. Again, just create it within the demo sandbox. I want to open up the layered viewpoint diagram. Okay, so for those that are using Archimate, this will be a familiar viewpoint. But what I want to do now is have EA dynamically filter the elements that are actually related to this viewpoint within Archimate. So what I can do is bring up the diagram properties here and choose the viewpoint that I'm interested in. And I want EA to filter out the elements that are not related and the relationships that are not related to that viewpoint. So I'm going to click the layered viewpoint here, and I'm going to say filter to the Metamodel. And once I do that, you see that the UML packages kind of fade into the background there, showing that they are not actually part of this Archimate viewpoint. And the reason for that is simple. They're actually just plain vanilla UML packages we put behind there. The rest are relevant to the layered viewpoint within Archimate. Now, it could be far more specific than that. Say I was only interested in the elements and relationships to do with, I don't know, the organization, for example. Once I select that, because it's filtered to view, all of the elements and the relationships between them that are not relevant to this viewpoint are dynamically filtered out for me. So it's a really useful tool, I guess, especially for the start. Enterprise architects, those that are using Archimate and other profiles like this, UAF is another example, where we provide a bunch of Metamodel views that you can filter your diagrams with. And as I mentioned before, these are completely customizable as well, so you can add your own. I want to talk briefly about the enhancements to Enterprise Architect's Properties window, and you've just had a sneak preview of that there. Entirely new for the Dockable Properties window, so you'll be used to this window. You can evoke it from Window Properties here. I'm just going to pin that to the side. Entirely new within Enterprise Architect 14 is support for editing relationship properties within this dockable view. So most of us will be familiar with editing elements, the name, stereotype, that kind of thing, within the element properties view. Now if I select a relationship like this, you see that all of the relationship properties are neatly categorized there for source and target and so forth. That's new. Diagrams are new as well. You've just had a bit of a look at that. So if I actually select the diagram background, that's where you saw me before, apply a Metamodel, filter to view. Well, all the other diagram properties are able to be edited directly within this dockable view. Of course, we're used to editing our elements within this view, but now it will respond intelligently with respect to structural and behavioral elements. You'll get a different set of properties that apply to that particular element that you have in context. Perhaps it's good to illustrate that with a specific example. So you'll see BPMN, SysML, XSD, they'll have dedicated tabs within this Dockable Properties view. So let me bring up an example of that. If I go to the BPMN model pattern that I instantiated before and click on, say, the business process here, well, that's now got context. Just dock that there. It's got context, and you can see the set of properties are all captured within that Dockable view. So the BPMN2 properties are defined there, and other tabs related to this element that I've got selected. And as I change the element, that's going to update intelligently to the set of properties that really focuses on the element that you've got in context. So this really makes the Dockable Properties view, an indispensable tool while you're doing modeling. I want to speak briefly now about the updates to the ProCloud Server that are being released in conjunction with Enterprise Architect 14. Key among those new features would be the integrations that the ProCloud Server now provides. There is actually an entire API that we're publishing, and some of the integrations that we've provided that use that API include integrations to Jira, Team Foundation Server or TFS, as well as cloud-based integration to other Enterprise Architect repositories. So that's a really exciting one. It actually allows you to cross-reference between your cloud-based EA model repositories and really maximize reuse of, say, reference data or particular branches of the model between different projects. So there are a raft of other changes associated with ProCloud Server that we're going to go into in more detail later on in this in the webinar series. So we won't cover all of those today. I do also want to mention, related to the ProCloud Server, of course, the changes that are happening to WebEA. So we've been responding to our user requests and very much appreciate that. And you'll see changes that reflect our action in that regard. One of the things that I know, for example, with the WebEA interface is a much improved way of handling or displaying the element properties. There's a whole new side panel there for the way that element properties are displayed. So certainly appreciate your requests and say keep them coming. We are acting on those, and you'll see that with the newly released version of WebEA in conjunction with EA14. There are other really exciting changes coming to WebEA, but we're going to announce those a little bit later on. I want to talk also about the business process and simulation changes. There's some really exciting things happening there. Just briefly on DMN, for those that are aware, DMN or decision modeling notation, there is entirely new support for this in Enterprise Architect 14. So this opens up a whole new area of modeling within EA. And I guess I could show you just briefly an example. This is one that I've created based on the model pattern. There's a complete DMN example that's provided as a model pattern in the new model wizard. So DMN, for those that are aware, of course it does have diagrams, and they provide a basis for determining, for example, the inputs to the decision-making process. So they're still necessary, but for those that are aware, a large part of what you're doing with DMN is kind of table-based work. And so there's a whole range of new views that facilitate that. So if I open up this business knowledge model here, just double-click the element, you'll see an entirely new and dedicated editor for supporting DMN there. And you'll see that editor is dynamic depending on what you actually open up, which decision table or aspect of DMN that you're working on. The editor will respond in kind. And these are editable views, of course, where I can actually put in the parameters that will go towards the decision-making process. So an entirely new area of modeling opens up with Enterprise Architect 14 in DMN, and with that, a range of new modeling interfaces that support that particular profile. So again, we're going to have a dedicated session on this. There'll be a webinar on DMN coming up, so look out for that. There are, of course, a range of other changes to do with model simulation, and that too will form a webinar in a future webinar in this EA14 webinar series. For those that are using Enterprise Architect for its code engineering and the visual execution analyzer, I just want to speak briefly about some of the changes with respect to that. Because as you may or may not be aware, Enterprise Architect actually has a visual execution analyzer that allows you to visualize and profile your executing applications. So with EA14, there is an all-new stack profiler, and that uses code markers to capture some very specific stack traces, which will help you to identify hotspots and usage scenarios from within your code. There are also enhancements to the integration with Visual Studio and its solution files, a new memory profiler. So it's a high-performance memory profiler that's built into EA14 to target specifically Windows C and C++ applications. Some of you may have seen the existing application profiler. We've featured that in previous webinars. So that's had some significant performance enhancements to support the Enterprise Architect 14 release. Executable state machines. I know many of you are very much interested in Enterprise Architect support for that. Well, the new model pattern wizard supports a range of model patterns specifically for the executable state machines. There are also enhancements for exporting your state machines and automatically adding those to development projects. And just to wrap up briefly with regard to NEAM 3, for those that are using the NEAM framework within Enterprise Architect, of course that support has existed before the release of EA14, But with the new release, we've just imported the NEAM 3.2 reference model into EA. We've improved EA's support in that regard. And also the schema composer has been enhanced to improve the way the message schemas are built up for NEAM. So again, that really deserves a session in its own right, perhaps at least a demo that we'll provide. This has been a very quick overview of the Enterprise Architect 14 release. We will be running several more sessions in our EA14 webinar series and drill down into some of the topics raised today. So be sure to access the Q&A and resources for this webinar via sparksystems.com/webinars, and we welcome your feedback, which you can email to webinar@sparksystems.com. Until next time, happy modelling.